Something in you is tired of pretending that more effort will finally make you feel secure. You have given more words, more patience, more time, more understanding, more emotional labor, and more chances than most people ever admit. You have tried to be softer, clearer, calmer, more lovable, more flexible, less needy, less expressive, less honest about how much this actually hurts. And still, there are moments when you feel the ache rise in your chest, because the more you chase, the less peaceful you become. The more you pursue, the less chosen you feel. The more you try to hold everything together, the more your inner world starts to shake. That is the part almost nobody teaches you. They teach effort. They teach persistence. They teach you to visualize, to focus, to stay positive, to work for what you want, to prove your value, to keep showing up. And yes, effort has its place, care has its place, intention has its place. But there is a line where devotion quietly becomes desperation, where sincerity turns into self-abandonment, where wanting something deeply becomes the reason you can no longer hear your own wisdom. And that is where so many people get stuck. Not because they are foolish, not because they are weak, not because they are asking for too much, but because somewhere along the way they learned that if they stopped reaching, they would disappear. If they stopped checking, they would be forgotten. If they stopped giving, they would lose their place. If they stopped chasing, love would pass them by. So you keep moving toward what keeps moving away. You call it hope. You call it loyalty. You call it effort. You call it being someone who does not give up easily. But under all of that, there is often a trembling question you do not want to say out loud. If I stop trying so hard, will anything good still come to me? Stay with me here. Because this is where the deeper truth begins. For many people, the moment they stop chasing is not the moment life becomes empty. It is the moment life finally has room to respond. It is the moment their nervous system stops shouting over their intuition. It is the moment they stop gripping so tightly that they can finally feel what is mutual, what is peaceful, what is real, and what has only been surviving on their effort. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about playing games, acting detached, or pretending you do not care. It is not about punishing anyone with silence or turning your heart into stone. It is about ending the pattern where your worth gets tied to pursuit. It is about learning that your energy is precious, and when you stop pouring it into fear, it becomes available for clarity, and clarity changes everything. Because when you are no longer chasing, you begin to notice. You notice who reaches back. You notice what feels safe. You notice where your body softens and where it tightens. You notice which opportunities need your force and which ones bloom in the presence of steadiness. You notice whether you are building connection or just managing anxiety with constant motion. That is the law you were rarely taught. Not that life rewards indifference, not that you should never care, but that receiving begins where self-abandonment ends, that peace is not the enemy of desire, that you do not become magnetic by making yourself smaller, louder, busier, or more available than your truth can bear. You become available to receive when you are no longer bargaining with your own soul for crumbs of relief. Let me say something clearly. Chasing does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like over-explaining. Sometimes it looks like sending one more message because you cannot settle. Sometimes it looks like saying yes when your body says no. Sometimes it looks like trying to be the easiest person in the room so nobody leaves. Sometimes it looks like being endlessly understanding with people who are only occasionally kind. Sometimes it looks like calling your exhaustion patience because the truth feels too sharp to face. And that is why this pattern can last so long, because it wears beautiful names. It wears the name loyalty, it wears the name love, it wears the name faith, it wears the name ambition, it wears the name effort, it wears the name maturity, it wears the name spiritual trust, even while your body is in a panic and your mind is spinning like a ceiling fan with emotional opinions. And sweetheart, no one needs that much emotional cardio before breakfast. Now I know what you might be thinking. If I stop chasing, am I giving up? If I stop reaching, am I being passive? If I stop trying to fix this, won't everything just fall apart? Not necessarily. Sometimes what falls apart is the illusion that your constant effort was creating harmony. Sometimes what falls apart is the fantasy that you can earn consistency from what is fundamentally inconsistent. Sometimes what falls away is not love, not opportunity, not connection, but your role as the one carrying all of it alone. And that loss is not always tragic. Sometimes it is relief in unfamiliar clothing. Because the root of chasing is rarely desire by itself. Desire can be clean. Desire can be honest. Desire can be tender and alive. The root of chasing is usually fear fused to desire, fear of being overlooked, fear of being left, fear of not mattering, fear of emptiness, fear that if you are not actively managing the outcome will confirm your worst story about yourself. So the chase begins. You monitor, you adjust, you anticipate, you perform, you refine your words, you rehearse your reactions. You become hyper-aware of every pause, every shift in tone, every delayed response, every sign, every possible meaning. You start living inside interpretation instead of presence. You stop asking, what is true here? And start asking, what can I do to make this go the way I need? That question will exhaust you because it places your peace at the mercy of variables you cannot control, another person's readiness, another person's honesty, timing, circumstances, silence, projection, your own old wounds waking up and calling themselves intuition. The mind can turn uncertainty into a full-time occupation. And when this becomes a pattern, your body learns it too. You do not just think the chase, you carry it in your shoulders, in your jaw, in your stomach, in the restless urge to check your phone, in the inability to settle into a quiet evening without reaching for a sign that you are still wanted, still visible, still safe, the body starts bracing for absence, and then you call that attachment love. But love is not a constant state of bracing. Love can include longing, yes. It can include vulnerability, yes. It can include risk, yes. But the pattern we are naming here is different. It is the pattern where your system believes tension is the price of connection. It is the pattern where uncertainty feels so threatening that movement becomes your sedative. This is why stopping the chase can feel terrifying at first. Not because it is wrong, but because it interrupts a coping strategy. It removes the behavior that once helped you feel temporarily less helpless. It asks you to sit in the raw space you were trying to outrun. It reveals how much of your effort was not actually moving you toward peace, but away from the discomfort of not being in control. And here is the reframe that changes everything. The opposite of chasing is not laziness. The opposite of chasing is trust with discernment. It is the ability to care without collapsing, to desire without begging, to hope without bargaining, to participate without performing, to let life reveal itself before you spend your soul trying to force a conclusion. That is where your power comes back. Not in withholding, not in pretending not to care, not in becoming unreachable. Your power comes back when your inner steadiness matters more to you than your old habit of pursuit. Your power comes back when you can pause before reacting, when you can feel your feelings without appointing them as emergency managers, when you can let a moment breathe long enough to see whether what you want also wants to meet you. And this is where I want to give you something practical, something simple, something you can carry into real life without turning it into another performance. I call it the release, return, receive practice. 3 gentle steps. Not to make you perfect, not to make anyone choose you, not to guarantee a result, but to help you come back to yourself so clearly that you stop confusing panic with devotion. The first step is release. Release means you interrupt the immediate impulse to chase, not forever, not dramatically, just for a moment. You do not send the extra message yet. You do not explain again yet. You do not volunteer more energy yet. You pause long enough to notice the urge rising in your body. You name it. Here is the urge to secure. Here is the urge to control. Here is the fear that if I do not move right now, I will lose everything. That naming matters. Because the moment you name the urge, you are no longer fully inside it. You create 1 inch of space between your fear and your behavior. And 1 inch of space can save you from hours of regret, confusion, and self-betrayal. The second step is return. Return means you come back to your body, your values, your actual life. You come back from the fantasy, from the projection, from the spiraling interpretation, from the desperate focus on what another person or outcome is doing. You ask, what is true in me right now? What do I need to feel grounded? What would dignity choose here? What would peace choose here? Return is not withdrawal from life. It is a return to center. It is making tea, taking a walk, putting the phone down in another room, breathing with your hand on your chest, writing the message in your notes instead of sending it, sitting with the fact that uncertainty is uncomfortable but not fatal, letting your body learn that a pause is not abandonment. And the third step is receive. Receive means you become willing to let reality show itself. You stop crowding the moment with extra effort. You stop over-functioning before there is evidence that more is needed. You allow what is mutual to meet you. You allow what is inconsistent to reveal itself. You allow silence to contain information. You allow ease to count as data. You allow your own calm to become part of the decision. This step is not passive. It is deeply observant. Receiving is active openness without force. It is listening. It is noticing. It is staying available to truth, even when truth is not the answer your fear was hoping to hear. It is saying, I do not need to manufacture clarity tonight. I can let what is real become visible. Release, return, receive. Simple words, deep practice. And here is what most people miss. You do not do these steps once and graduate into enlightenment with perfect posture and a halo that also answers emails. You do them again and again in tiny moments, in the pause before replying, in the urge to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, in the instinct to rescue a connection that only exists because you keep resuscitating it. That is the work. Tiny, holy interruptions. So let us make this real. Say someone has gone quiet and every part of you wants to close the gap immediately. Your mind starts generating reasons. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe you should check in again, but casually, but warmly, but not too warmly, but somehow in a way that communicates secure detachment while secretly screaming from the attic. Release. Do not act on the first wave. Set the phone down. Feel what happens in your body. Notice the heat, the pull, the urgency, the story. Instead of obeying it, witness it. Tell yourself the truth. I am activated right now. I want relief. I do not yet have clarity. Those are not the same thing. Then return. Come back to your breath. Come back to the room you are in. Come back to your own life, which deserves your presence, even while uncertainty is visiting. Ask yourself whether your next action would create peace or merely postpone discomfort for 12 minutes. Ask whether the version of you that feels safest is also the version that abandons herself the fastest. Then receive. Let the silence say something. Let the pattern reveal itself. If someone cares, their care has ways of becoming known over time. If something is aligned, it does not require constant self-erasure to stay alive. If a connection can only survive through your endless emotional labor, receiving will show you that too. This applies beyond relationships. It applies to work, to creative opportunities, to friendships, to family dynamics, to every space where you have learned to overextend in order to feel secure. Maybe you keep offering more at work because you are afraid that resting will make you replaceable. Maybe you keep fixing every misunderstanding in your family because being the calm one became your role. Maybe you keep saying yes to invitations, requests, conversations, and obligations that leave you depleted because part of you still believes usefulness is the same thing as worth. It is not. Usefulness can be generous, it can be beautiful, but when usefulness becomes your identity, rest begins to feel dangerous. Boundaries begin to feel selfish. Non-performance begins to feel like disappearance. So you chase relevance, you chase approval, you chase harmony, you chase proof that you belong. And still, your spirit stays hungry, because what you actually need is not more applause for your overgiving. What you need is the safety to exist without constant output, the safety to be present without proving, the safety to let connection be mutual, not managed. Try a few small experiments with this. The next time you feel the urge to send a message for reassurance, wait 10 minutes first, not as punishment, not as a game, just as a way to ask your body, what am I truly seeking right now? In those 10 minutes, place one hand on your chest and one on your stomach. Breathe slowly. Notice whether the urge softens, changes shape, or reveals a deeper feeling underneath. Another experiment. At the end of the day, write down one moment where you started to chase, and one moment where you chose to pause. No judgment, just observation. You are teaching yourself to see the pattern without becoming the pattern. Awareness is gentler than shame and far more useful. And one more, ask yourself this simple question when you feel anxious about being wanted. Does this feel mutual or does this feel managed? That one question can cut through so much fog. Mutual feels alive on both sides. Managed feels like you are holding up a roof no one else notices is falling. Now let me add something important. Stopping the chase does not mean you never initiate. It does not mean you become silent, rigid, or emotionally unavailable. Healthy effort exists. Honest communication exists. Real vulnerability exists. The difference is energy. The difference is whether your action is coming from clarity or panic, self-respect or self-erasure, truth or fear. You can say what you feel without chasing. You can express desire without collapsing. You can reach once without reaching 10 times. You can ask for clarity without turning your entire nervous system into a hostage negotiation. And yes, that last one needed to be said, because some of you are trying to decode 3 punctuation marks like they are ancient prophecy. Take a breath, darling. Sometimes a delayed reply is just a delayed reply. Sometimes confusion is information. Sometimes mixed signals are not mysterious soul lessons wrapped in spiritual fog. Sometimes they are simply mixed signals. And your peace is too precious to be spent turning ambiguity into destiny. This is where the permission begins to open. You are allowed to stop over-functioning for every uncertain thing in your life. You are allowed to stop auditioning for reassurance. You are allowed to stop translating inconsistency into hidden depth. You are allowed to stop proving your softness to people who only value access. You are allowed to stop carrying both ends of a bond and calling that devotion. You are allowed to rest. Not once, everything is resolved. Now, you are allowed to let an unanswered mom remain unanswered for a while. You are allowed to let someone show you who they are without coaching them into better behavior. You are allowed to let your body unclench before life gives you all the proof you wanted. You are allowed to choose dignity before certainty. You are allowed to disappoint the old pattern that says if you are not chasing, you are failing. Listen to me carefully. You do not have to perform your worth until someone finally believes it. You do not have to exhaust yourself into being chosen. You do not have to make yourself endlessly understandable to be deserving of care. You do not have to become smaller, sweeter, easier, quieter, or more useful in order to receive what is right for you. And you do not have to keep calling your anxiety intuition just because your body has been trained to expect instability. That training can change. Slowly, kindly, honestly, it can change. Every time you pause instead of pursue, you send your body a new message. Every time you stay with yourself in uncertainty, you build trust. Every time you let reality reveal itself before you rush in to manage it, you create space for truth. This is how self-respect becomes lived, not just spoken. This is how peace stops being an idea and starts becoming a felt experience. Now I know that for some people, stopping the chase brings grief. Of course it does. Because once you stop filling the silence with effort, you may see what was never truly meeting you. Once you stop compensating, you may feel the loneliness you were working so hard to avoid. Once you stop carrying the fantasy, you may have to meet the loss of what you hoped this would become. Be gentle there. That grief is not failure. That grief is information. That grief is honesty. That grief is often the doorway between old survival and new freedom. It is the ache of seeing clearly. And while clarity can sting, it also liberates, because what is true may not always comfort you immediately, but it gives you something the chase never can. It gives you solid ground. From that ground, you make different choices. You stop being impressed by intensity that has no consistency. You stop romanticizing confusion. You stop calling emotional hunger chemistry. You stop thinking the hardest thing to get must be the most valuable. You start noticing calm. You start trusting steadiness. You start recognizing that what is right for you may not create the same dramatic highs, but it also does not demand that you betray yourself for access. That is a profound shift, and it changes what becomes possible. Because when you stop chasing, your energy returns, your creativity returns, your humor returns, your appetite for your own life returns. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You start enjoying your own company again. You stop organizing your days around someone else's inconsistency. You remember that your life is not a waiting room. This is why people sometimes say that when they let go, everything came. Not because the universe is rewarding performance in reverse, but because when they stopped scattering themselves in fear, they became available for what was actually aligned. They could recognize it, they could feel it, they could choose it, they could stop mistaking turbulence for meaning, they could stop feeding closed doors with open heart energy. And sometimes, yes, what they wanted did come closer. Not always in the form they expected, not always on the timeline they begged for, but often in a way that felt cleaner, steadier, less expensive to the soul. Because receiving is not just about getting, it is about being able to recognize and welcome what nourishes rather than drains. So let us come full circle. Who stops chasing first receives everything. Not everything as in every specific outcome, not every person, every fantasy, every wish exactly as the mind designed it, but everything that matters more than forced results. Clarity, self-trust, dignity, discernment, peace, energy, space, the ability to feel mutuality, the ability to walk away from what only responds to your panic, the ability to remain open without being easily consumed. That is not a small thing. That is a reclamation. And once you feel that reclamation, even briefly, you begin to understand something beautiful. You were never meant to build your life around pursuit. You were meant to live in such honest relationship with yourself that what is not for you cannot easily hijack your peace, and what is for you has room to arrive. You do not receive by collapsing. You do not receive by convincing. You do not receive by spinning. You receive by becoming steady enough to notice what is real. So tonight, or this morning, or whenever these words are finding you, let this be the moment you loosen your grip just enough to breathe. Let this be the moment you stop treating urgency like wisdom. Let this be the moment you choose one pause, one boundary, one act of self-return that tells your spirit, I am no longer leaving you behind just to feel chosen for a second. That choice matters. Maybe no one applauds it. Maybe no one even sees it. But you will feel it, in the way your body softens, in the way your thoughts slow down, in the way your energy starts gathering back around your own life, in the way confusion loses some of its glamour, in the way peace begins to feel less boring and more sacred. And if this truth is landing somewhere tender in you, hold it gently. You do not need to master it all today. You only need to notice the next moment when chasing tries to call itself love and choose differently by 1 inch, 1 breath, 1 pause, 1 honest question, 1 quiet act of staying with yourself. That is how a new life begins, not all at once, but right there. If this landed somewhere in you, stay with me. There is more where this came from. And carry this with you. What is meant to meet you does not ask you to abandon yourself on the way there. There is another reason this matters so much, and it is quieter than most people expect. When you chase, you train yourself to ignore your own signals. You override fatigue, you dismiss discomfort, you explain away red flags because the hope of being received feels more important than the evidence in front of you. You tell yourself to be patient when your spirit is pleading for honesty. You tell yourself to be understanding when your body is asking for protection. You tell yourself to keep the faith when what you really need is to tell the truth. That inner split is costly. Not because you are broken, but because every time you leave yourself to maintain access to something uncertain, trust inside you weakens. You begin to doubt your own perception. You begin to wonder whether your needs are too much, your timing is wrong, your standards are unrealistic, your sensitivity is the problem. And slowly, the focus moves away from what is actually happening and onto how to make yourself easier to keep around. That is the hidden sadness of chasing. It does not only drain your energy, it reshapes your identity. It tempts you to become a version of yourself built around accommodation, a version that can tolerate almost anything as long as there is still a chance, a version that calls self-silencing wisdom and calls overextending love. But you were not made to survive on a chance. You were not made to live on almost. You were not made to call crumbs a feast. You were not made to confuse being tolerated with being cherished. And once you really let that sink in, something soft but powerful begins to happen. You stop asking only, "How do I keep this?" You begin asking, "Does this deserve my energy? Does this honor my peace? Does this deepen my life? Or does it keep me in suspense? Does this invite the best of me forward? Or does it keep awakening the most frightened part of me?" Those questions change the entire atmosphere of your choices. Because chasing is always future-focused. It says, maybe later, maybe soon, maybe if I do this one more thing. But receiving lives in the present, it asks, what is true now? What is being shown now? What does my body know now? What kind of love, work, friendship, or opportunity am I participating in now? The present may not always flatter your fantasy, but it will protect your life. And that protection is sacred. It means you no longer have to wait until you are completely depleted to choose yourself. You no longer have to collect 10 disappointments before one boundary is allowed. You no longer have to earn rest by suffering first. You can choose yourself while the story is still unfolding. You can choose yourself while part of you still hopes. You can choose yourself before certainty arrives. That is not selfish. That is maturity with a heartbeat. And maybe that is the deepest law hidden inside this whole conversation. The less you chase for proof, the more clearly you can feel what is already here. The steadier you become, the less noise you confuse for guidance. The more honestly you stand with yourself, the less appealing chaos becomes. You begin to receive not because you forced life to open, but because you finally stopped gripping what kept your hands too full to hold anything real. So be tender with your own unwinding. This pattern did not appear overnight, and it does not leave because you heard one sentence on one emotional evening. It changes through practice, through remembrance, through 100 small moments when you choose not to run after what is asking you to run past yourself. That choice is holy,